Hey, hello. We talk a lot about sustainability in master planning, infrastructure architecture, landscape architecture, in the construction industry in general. Now, despite that we talk a lot about sustainability, a lot of clients, and I'm not excluding governments, and I'm also not excluding architects and consultants and landscape architects and so on, a lot of them don't care about sustainability, sadly. Most of them care about the cost, the profit, and how it looks like. And nothing against a beautiful building. In fact, in contrary, a beautiful building has more chance to be being sustainable than an ugly one. And now you think like, what is he talking about? Hear me out. Nowadays you can build a building with the most advanced technology and the most advanced recycled, upcycled materials. If it doesn't work and if it's not loved because it's ugly, it will not survive very long, and therefore it's not sustainable. I actually think that building in the past were much more sustainable. They were built, they had a certain quality, and they last forever, and therefore they are way more sustainable. Now you can argue that they had more carbon footprint at the beginning, maybe. I understand. Nowadays, everything needs to go very quick. Everything is very complex. For a project, you need so many specialists nowadays. Engineers, MEP consultants, water feature consultants, the architects themselves. Some of them are only designing, the others actually executing, construction companies. Everything is very detached and very few people understand the bigger picture and how everything works together. And I think that needs to change. If we want to have a less devastating impact on the planet, then we need to change that. We need to start to think different. And now what has this all to do with sun hour studies? Well, I'm talking in general about analysis in architecture. And I see it very often in a lot of presentations. I see beautiful presentations, beautiful images, and at the end, one slide about sustainability and then maybe a sun hour study. And nobody cares about this, and then nobody cares about the sun hour study. I'm not generalizing. I'm not saying that all clients are like that and that all countries are like that. A lot of countries have very strict policies in place, which is a great thing. Nevertheless, I want you to think different, and I hope this video helps, because I will explain how we can use sun hour studies in our design process. Very often, I see these beautiful presentations, again, beautiful images, and then a sun hour study or any other analysis of the space, but no conclusion on how that information is used on the design. And it's completely pointless. And I will talk about that. I will talk about when not to do a sun hour study. All right. But before, we actually need to go through and see how we can build the script. And I showed the sun hour study before. I'll show it again, and I will talk about what you can actually get out of it. All right. See you on the other side. Back in Grasshopper after my emotional speech, dramatic. Anyway, well, as you hopefully remember, the last video on Ladybug, aside from me sketching and bubble diagrams and so on, before that we did the first analysis study. We analyzed geometry, and we used the first item here, the direct sun hours. Now, the direct sun hours is the first tool here where we actually analyze geometry. And back then I said we need to have a model first. We need to have some sort of model, ideally a simple model, simple massing model, in order to start using these tools. Now I want to dive a bit deeper because of what I said before. A sun hour study is not just a sun hour study. It actually, what it's supposed to do, it triggers a response. It's not just a tick box exercise because in your client brief is said you need to deliver a sun hour study. No, there you can set yourself apart from others, make a sun hour study, but then use it to your advantage. Now, I want to talk very quickly about what is sun hour study really. And in that case, it's called direct sun hours. And this is important. This is an important element it's called direct sun hours. I will read through this so you hopefully get a better understanding. Calculate the number of hours of direct sunlight received by the geometry using sun vectors obtained from the Ladybug sun path component. So back then we built this is the sun path, or this is our, it's the Ladybug sun path tool, and it creates vectors from the position of the sunlight to the model, and the vectors are used then to create this heat map. heat map is not, it's not about temperature. It's about showing how much sunlight, how much direct sun hours were hitting the surface. And I will explain a bit more about that in a bit. Such direct sun calculations can be used for shadow studies and outdoor environments, or can be used to estimate glare potential from direct sun on the indoors. There is way more to that. It's not just that. It's not just to create a sun study. It is already the misconception. Yes, sun study or shadow study. Yes, of course, but for what? Note, then it says here, note that this component uses the CAD environment's ray intersection method, which can be fast for geometries with low complexity, but does not scale well for complex geometries or many test points. For such complex studies, honeybee radiance should be used. I agree. So, but this is the first point for you to understand what's going on. What do we need for this study? We need the sun path, and we need the direct sun hour study tool. We need a geometry, which is the geometry which we want to test, and we need a context, which is the shading element. In our case here, and I can maybe show that what that means is I use the context also as geometry to be tested. In that case, the building. So in here, in this geometry slot is the building, but it's geometry and it's context at the same time. So for example, I could have here, I don't know, a shading device, a shading element, and I don't want to, I'm not interested to calculate how much sunlight hits this thing. So I can just place it into the context only if I want that. Let's do that. By the way, don't do this. Stop your grasshopper calculation and then choose your geometry. Not like me now, where I just choose the geometry and then now I need to recalculate everything. Although I haven't chosen everything yet. I will lock this first. If you click on your wheel, you can lock your grasshopper and then it doesn't calculate. As you can see here, so we have the building, we have this shading element, and we have the ground surface. Now the ground surface is my geometry I want to test. And I also want to test the building, but the building makes shadows, so I also use it as context. Now I could add a third one here and say this is only shading, this is only context. So I can plug this in here together. So we have a geometry, which is what's here. We have, maybe I'll show, and it will, no, not disable, preview. Oh, that doesn't work if it's locked. Okay. I have my ground plane here in the geometry, and probably the best way is to rename this. Anyway, we have our building in here, and we have our shading in here, which is only context. I only use this as shading. I'm not testing the surface itself. So I can do this. And now I can unlock my solver. So that looks very weird. And a lot of people ask me, why do I have these stripes and why is this? It's because this tool creates a new mesh with the colors baked into it. So you have your geometry in Rhino, and then on top of that you have a mesh which has a color, and that's overlapping. That's why we can just take this and just hide. Now you can see that we have shading here. This is from our shading element, and then we have building as part of the shading, but also part of the geometry we want to test. And then we have the ground plane. So that's one thing, that's how it works. And then we have the grid size. This is a grid size actually quite small, that's why it takes quite long. I will change that so the calculation is faster. Go back here and I'll say 1 meter grid. I will just turn this on again. So now it's probably also better to explain what's happening. It says here hours, and then it says 2182 hours. Okay. So yellow means that in the testing period, which is in that case a half year, so we use the half year from January to June, end of June. And during the period, there are 2182 sun hours on these like yellow bits. That means yellow means these are the areas which get the most sunlight. So imagine this. So imagine how it works. The sun comes up, and then on each of these squares, it's tested if the sunlight hits the surface or not. If it does, it becomes 1 point. If it does not, it becomes 0. So 1 and 0. Next hour, a few others which were before in the shadow also now get the sun. So they get 1 point. So then there's some squares, they have 2 points. One have 0, and one have 1 point, and so on and so forth. So it goes through the whole year or the half year or whatever period you choose, and it will take that and adds everything up for each of these cells, and that will give you the exact number of hours per cell. And we talk about direct sun hours. There is no reflection from any surface. It's only the direct sun hours. It's very important. A lot of people don't understand that. They think, oh, I'll never get any sunlight here, or I never get any sunlight on certain areas. So these spaces are completely useless. It's not true, because you get daylight. Daylight is the sky also included. So skylight, reflection from surfaces and so on also creates light. But this study is only about the direct sun hours. Very important. Now, as you remember, we have is that we have our model. We created a simple model. That's what's in the description also. We need a simple model in order to run this. Otherwise, the calculation is quite long. You can run more complex models, but it's better than to use Honeybee. In that case, I deliberately created a relatively simple model where we can run our sun hour study. And in that case, I will not use this extra shading. Let's lock this again. I'm gonna delete this. And I want to test everything. So I actually don't need this part here. I'll just take everything and test it put it into this geometry slot. That makes sure that I use everything as a context, but also as geometry, which should be tested. So basically self-shading elements are included. So I go here, check first. Let's see. Okay, 46 surfaces, 18 poly surfaces, 6 extrusions added to selection. I just check this because I want to make sure that I don't choose any lines or curves and so on. All right, so I can select all this and then set multiple geometry. Now this will take a bit, but let's do this. Just unlock and then let's see how long it takes. Okay, that was fairly quickly, and we already can see there's a problem. So I will go back here. I will lock this, and we need to fix some stuff here. Maybe let's hide this first. By the way, closing this window doesn't remove our Grasshopper script. It only closes it. So if I click here, it's still here. Everything's here, even the calculation. Nothing's gone. If I just minimize it, you will still see everything. If I click it away, then it's closed. And that's what we want, because we need to fix something here first. This is a problem comes up quite often, and people are confused why this happens. I need to check my orientation of the different surfaces. It seems like the surface, maybe let's go back here. This is actually quite good. So it seems like these are all fine. These are all fine, but these are not. There's something wrong here. It's the inner courtyard, and also this one. See, it's upside down. Let's check this one. It's also upside down. This one, that's correct. Maybe it's easier with the shaded viewport. That's now okay. This needs to be flipped. That's good. It's also good. This is wrong. Now we can do it again. So flipping these makes sure that we calculate the sun hour studies on the right side of the geometry. Otherwise, it shows blue. It says 0 hours, although they are completely exposed, and that a lot of people get confused by that. They don't know how to deal with this. So I just unlock this again, and let's go. And because we use a meter grid, actually goes very quick. Let's go back to the rendered viewport, and what I want to do is I want to grab all these and hide. Oops, that was not good. Why was that? Why did this happen? For some reason there's some bug here with the rendered viewport. Anyway, we can just use our shaded viewport instead. It's totally fine, because this is a colored mesh anyway, so no problem here. Now, so we have our sun hour study, and this is for a half year. It's faster than to calculate the whole year, and the sun will pretty much move in the same way, just reversed. So that's why if you want to have the whole year, you just add up or just multiply by 2 these numbers. It's gonna be more or less the same output, really. A few things to say here on this output. So although we try to generate the grid, some surfaces are harder to create this grid surface on top of it. That's why they look more jagged. They have these triangulated edges. Well, we get a lot of sunlight, no question that. We haven't yet put any trees or anything, but we can see that we get less sunlight in here. That means because it's a courtyard, sometimes you get no sunlight in the morning or in the afternoon, whereas all the other areas actually get still sunlight. And that's actually a start for us to on how we could use that. Now imagine this to be in a different place, because this is very close to the equator. In a more Nordic country, for example, it would be probably much different. What can you use this for? Because I promised that I would show you what is it good for? What is the sun hour study really good for? Let's talk about what are the options you have in order to use it in your early design process, and then we'll talk about when you not use it. Well, for example, shadow studies for architecture. Why is it important? In dense cities, in that case maybe less. So architects and urban planners use the sun hour data to analyze how the shadow is cast on neighboring buildings, and that helps to place the building on the plot to avoid too much shadow on the neighboring building, for example. You need to take that with a grain of salt, because in some areas you maybe want to have shadow. So for example, I lived quite a long time in Shanghai. In Shanghai, in summer, actually the tall buildings create a nice shade. Don't get me wrong, it's a nice shade. So you could argue that, and then of course in winter the shade is terrible, because it actually cools the space down quite a lot. But here you can see already the first use is the placement of your building on the site. Where is it best used on the site? Where does it create the least impact on the neighboring buildings, either too much shadow or too less shadow? Of course, if other buildings, for example, use solar panels, you probably don't want to create any shade on the neighboring buildings, or very little shade on the neighboring buildings. Where we come to the second point. Sun hour studies also helps to locate your solar panels. In one of the previous videos, we talked about the orientation of solar panels. In that case, because we're very close to the equator, the position of the panel is pretty much upwards. So actually, we don't need to check much here. We know it's upwards, but which are the areas where it suits best? In that case, it would be, of course, the roofs. The roofs of any of these. Well, we haven't yet put any trees, so the trees might have an impact as well. And we do that probably in one of the next videos. The placement of solar panels is crucial. So you could have a diagram in your first concept showing the areas where solar panels are possible, and then you can work with an engineer to figure out how much solar panels you want, you should have, and where they are located, and they can then confirm the right location. But it's like, this would be like part of what I believe in architects or landscape architects. It should be part of the design process to think about these things. So I could, for example, use my snipping tool here just to explain it a bit better. With this, I can already have quite some information here and say, well, which area are actually useful for solar panels. Definitely this one here. Then here, actually I have a bit of a shadow, so it might not be ideal. I have these areas, and the top. And here is a bit of shadow. Then I could have these areas and these. In the landscape, if it's a solar panel farm in the desert, you can have it everywhere, of course, but it's a farm, so we don't want to have solar panels here. We want to have it somewhere on the roof, ideally. Now, that could tell me already that I might need to actually change the geometry of my building a bit. If I want to use the whole roof, then maybe these roofs should be all the same height. They should be all the same height. And so they're equal. I can use solar panels everywhere. So that you can see there's already the next thinking process of your design. What else? It can be used for glare assessment. Now, in that case, we probably would need to do more studies. We need to study probably the mornings. We can do it very easily. We can say which time of the day is the best for which activity. And glare assessment is one thing. Glare assessment, so what we could do, for example, here, we could say, instead of like testing the whole, like a half year for all the hours where we have sunlight, we could test only the hours from 7 in the morning to 10 until lunch break. Let's do that. So we have the month start hours. Let's keep that with 0 because we don't know exactly when the sun goes up, and the end hour is 6. Oh, sorry, this is the end month. So end month is 6, and then end, but the end hour is not 23. It should be like 11, let's say. I'm gonna close this here again just to make sure we don't do something wrong. Let's say 11 or maybe 12. It's from midnight to 12. And the sun path will automatically just choose the right vectors. So all the hours where there's no sunlight will not be counted anyway. So let's start this again. All right. So now you can see we only testing the hours from around probably 6 o'clock in the morning until 12 o'clock. And we can see here most shade we have on that side and most sunlight we have on this side. So that could inform, first of all, what is the program inside the building. Based on what we discussed before, we had like office, sleeping quarters, and so on. Maybe that's something to think about. Where do I place the right thing? My office, for example. The office may be better located on that side because it gets daylight, but it doesn't get too much direct sunlight. Whereas this side is actually super exposed by sunlight. So we need to think about that. That could inform, for example, now your facade design. Do you need special self-shading elements? What is the program inside, and how can we prevent too much glare? Speaking of program, it not just shows you the program inside, or it gives you a clue what the program should be inside the building. It also gives you an idea what it could be outside. So in the morning, we have quite some shade here that may be beneficial if I have a small market. Women go there in the morning, they buy some stuff from the farm, and it could be good that there's a lot of shade. We also want to add a tree, by the way, here, which also will create some shade. We have the courtyard, which has some shade areas that allows for areas which have a bit sunlight, a bit more sunlight, but also areas where there's shading. So that could be beneficial. So you have areas, or it's a flexible space where you can shift your activity depending on where you need it. We could also now look at the evenings. For example, what's happening in the evening. So if I go back to my script and say, how is the sunlight from, let's say, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, or let's say 2 o'clock in the afternoon until end of day. Let's lock this again, and we can have here start hour is 2 o'clock in the afternoon, end hour is 11 o'clock in the evening. Unlock. All right, very different. It's good that all these planting areas still get sunlight, but at the same time we have more sunlight on that side, which is interesting. That tells us that we might want to reconsider a bit what the program is around this building. Is it better to have our car park here where there's less sunlight? It could be nice that the entrance space or this welcome plaza or welcome square has quite some sunlight, so that allows for activity in the evenings. Maybe the market continues in the evening. Actually, they have some food stalls, or they can sell some produce, invite people to stay there. It also shows us a bit about on how the sunlight behaves in the evenings for solar panels. So you still get a lot of sunlight on the highest rooftops, of course. But yeah, we could now look at our initial program and see what are we allowing inside here. So for example, if this is office, and then in the evenings, people, they're moving more to the living quarters, then here it's more quiet in the back, and then here you have the glare on that side, and then maybe your office hours are already finished, and you don't need special treatment here because you're not using that space that much. On the other hand, if there is, I think this was a children's space, we had some living quarters or sleeping areas. We might need to think about that, if that makes sense. But that's how you could use the sun hour study as well. And you can, of course, go into your analysis period and be very specific with your days you choose from. Maybe you want to select a certain month, especially if you're in a different country, more northern, in the northern hemisphere, and you want to test. You might want to test specific months very carefully. Are there any holidays with festivals where you want to test one specific day, or you have an event space, an outdoor event space, and you want to test how successful that event space could be during certain months where you have certain festivals. So there's many ways to think about how to use this. On my list is also outdoor seating. It goes hand in hand, of course, with the outdoor activity. Here it could be nice if it's very hot days. It could be nice to have the shade in the afternoon. The building shades these spaces where you can sit outside. Another very, very big aspect here, although in that case, because we are so close to the equator, the light is distributed quite equally. In a northern country like the UK, for example, you always have a north side, which is always darker than the south side. That plays a big role in, for example, vegetation and planting design. You get a very, very clear understanding of which areas are suitable for plants which are used for full sunlight, which are used for only, which need like a half kind of situation where it's partial sunlight, partial shade, or plants which are in the shade. For example, if I would use this diagram here, and I would assume, which is not, I would assume this is my distribution over the whole day from a period from January to June, then I could specify based on the plan where are the areas for plants suitable for full sunlight, partial shade, and full shading. I do this all the time in my design. For example, here, say the areas, because we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. It's not very equal, but I could, for example, say, okay, this area here is full and then shade. And we always have skylight, by the way. So some plants, they only need skylight. They don't need, they need a lot of skylight, but they don't need direct sunlight. So, but that gives me a very good idea on a very broad level of what kind of plants could be suitable. And if I have plants on my roof, and I'm almost only marking this upper area here, so that gives me the full sunlight, including these areas. Then I have the partial sunlight area, which is inside here, and then I have shadow areas, which are these blue areas. So I could, of course, now this is not a very good sketch, but you know what I mean. You could bring this in a very nice illustrated document. Now this is already half the deal of a planting plan. Now I can choose species for this area. I can choose this species for this area and these areas. There's also something about a first idea about the outdoor comfort, heat island effect. What if I don't have solar panels and I have these are just concrete buildings? They accumulate a lot of heat on the roofs. Would it not be better to have, for example, green roofs? So things like that. Heat island effect, it could be a first indication of where I might need to have some design solutions. And again, the placement of windows, we talked about it before, glare, strategies against glare. Is it the program inside, but also the size of windows? Maybe on areas where you have loads of exposure, you might want to minimize your window, or you want to place it in a certain way. In colder countries, you might want to use the window openings for heat gain. You want to actually get a lot of sunlight into your building, and that will help you to save cost on heating. So the next step would be going to daylight studies. That means, for example, if I have an office building, I want to have a lot of daylight, but I don't want to have direct sunlight. So again, the direct sun hour study helps a lot to understand your design from a very early stage, and you can make informed decisions of what comes afterwards. For example, the daylight study with Honeybee. And we talked about event planning. So event planning is one of the big topics. Where do I have sunlight? Orientation of football fields, by the way. There's architects who don't know that. There's a certain way on how you orient a play field. there's a very strict standard on how it's placed towards sunlight, so there's no glare, or players have equal conditions. That's something to think about. Events, you don't want to have a glare into the people watching a play. So if you want to watch a play and then you have the sunlight going into your face, then what's the point? Then you need to think about that. Are you glaring the people who play on the stage, or are you glaring the people sitting in the audience? So thinking about all these things can help with a sunlight study, a direct sun hour study. And it's not just the amount of hours, but it's where the sunlight comes from and during which time of the day. All right. Hey, that's quite a lot what you get out of this very simple analysis, and I think it's super valid. It's a very important analysis. And in the next video, we will look at the incident radiation, which is equally interesting. All right, so now back to the original, back to my title of the video. Why when you should not use a sun hour study? Well, don't use a sun hour study if you have finished your design and just to tick a box, creating a sun hour study completely for nothing. Then you have failed the task. Do your sun studies when there's still time, when there's still possibility to change your design. Of course, it's good to do a sun study afterwards to verify what you changed. Very often I got comments in the past where people design everything to the last detail and then they do a sun study, and then first of all it takes hours to calculate because they have all the details in their model, and second, yeah, they did a sun study just to tick a box in their presentation. But that's not the point of a sun study. So please remember, we all need to change our thinking on that. So that's why don't do a sun hour study at the end of your design exercise. Don't do a sun hour study just to tick a box. That's when you not should do a sun hour study. All right, I hope you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you in the next one.